Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Kwani Has Questions on NBC 10 Boston. My guest today doesn't really need an introduction, especially if you're a Boston Celtics fan here in Boston, the greater Boston area. Gary Washburn of the Boston Globe. He is the national NBA writer. Thank you for being here today.
Kwani, it's great to be here. It's an honor, to be here with Kwani Has Questions. Like, I got to call my mom after this.
Please do. I can't with you. So I have to say, I've known Gary for years. When I started at NBC Sports Boston, he was one of my first few mentors, but now I can call you a colleague.
But I think you've moved up, elevated to colleague. Yes.
Eventually. But I think one of the things that's interesting in general is that a lot of times you'll work with someone or see them on a regular basis, but you don't really know their story. So today I have the honor of really getting Gary Washburn's story. As a journalist, a lot of times, especially Gary, he does not like to be the story, but he has a new book that just came out that we'll get into in just a second. So we'll talk about that. But let's start with your journey into covering the NBA. When did you know that this was something that you wanted to do?
I always knew I wanted to be in the media somehow. When I was a kid, there was a guy who used to do the NFL games from the football field. He, like on NBC Sports, his name was Bryant Gumbel.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously Today's Show and Real Sports, and obviously went on to amazing things. But he was a on-the-field reporter, and he looked like me. He had afro and everything. So I was like, okay, I want to do something like that. So I knew from teenager, probably younger than that, I wanted to be in the media. Then I started writing for the school paper in college. And once I found out I could be a full-time sports writer, that I could do nothing but sports, I could watch the games for a living and get paid for it, I was all in. And
I know you grew up in the LA area, which naturally would have meant that you're a Lakers fan.
Yeah, grew up a big Laker fan, big Laker fan, yeah. So yeah, that was, I mean, everybody loved the Lakers. Back then it was Showtime era, Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, all the greats, Michael Cooper. So yeah, it was interesting. And then, you learn to hate the Celtics. Obviously, they met in the finals 3 times in a 4-year period, and you get your impressions of Boston. You see the cold, the cold days in the Garden, and all the fans screaming and yelling. You're like, I hate that place, I hate that city, I hate that team. And then to work here, obviously now for 15 years, and to cover the Celtics for 15 years, yeah, ironic.
Generally speaking, sports fans, which for the most part, people that end up in sports journalism, you would imagine they were a fan at one point. When did you realize that there was a need for separation of your fandom and really having that, hopefully,
once you get into journalism,
opinion?
You can't cheer. Like, you can't, and that was kind of the rule, the golden rule. Like, you can maybe privately support, privately be a situation where you root for the guys, because gals, when you cover a team, you get to know them. You want good things for them. You don't want, like, I want them to lose. I hate those guys.
Right.
Like, there's some teams you probably cover over the years that you're like, I don't like these guys. These guys are all jerks, or these gals are all jerks, and you don't want the best for them. But you privately could say, hey, it's cool to see them successful, but the way you cover the team has to be unbiased. You cannot be a fan. You can't have your pom-poms. You can't take it easy or give them a break. There has to be a level of journalism that happens, and I think now that's a little difficult, because obviously with social media, everybody's an expert, everybody's a fan, everybody can do what you want, everybody can easily do what you do. Oh, I know the game better than you. I've been, I've watched the Celtics for years, but you have to keep your unbiased opinions. You have to just tell it like it is, and I think hopefully the readers respect that.
A recent example for you, and not to bring up a bad memory, but when Dennis Schroeder was on the team briefly, there was a moment where he basically asked you, what team were you rooting for?
Yeah,
and
who was I with?
Yeah.
And that was, and I said, I'm not with anybody. I cover the Celtics. So I think sometimes the athletes expect that they're going to get favoritism, and you just have to let them know, hey, when you do well, I'm going to write it. When you don't do well, I'm going to write it. And I think most of the players and most of the coaches respect that. As long as you keep it real, as long as you back up your opinions with facts and maybe statistics, as opposed to just going at guys. I mean, there's obviously been many times over the years where people, columnists or writers have taken shots at guys, trying to be funny or trying to make a name, trying to make a headline, trying to make a story. That's not right. What you want to do is you want to back up what you have to say with facts, and the players and the coaches can't help but respect that.
you've built a good rapport with not only the organization, but just the respect that you have in the league, but also because, to your point, you built this tough skin of understanding it's not personal. I'm trying to be in the best interest of the reader, the viewer, so that they can gain their own opinion. But how did you get to that point?
Well, it's just a gradual, honestly. I mean, you just learn to become more comfortable in your skin. You have to have an approach of how you cover a team. My approach, being a national writer and being a columnist, is I have the right to give my opinion. I'm not, now, times I write a game story, let's say, I can be like, I can tell like it is. I can't give my opinion. I'm giving you the facts. A column, I have to give you my opinion. And when I back up that opinion, I have to have with people not calling me an idiot the next day, which still happens sometimes, obviously. You just have to be strong in your convictions, but also you have to watch the game. You have to know what you're talking about. And if you don't know what you're talking about or you're not sure, don't write it. Don't put it out there. I think this is what happened. I'm not quite sure, but I'm 60% sure this is what's going on. Like, no, don't do that. What you want to do is you want to be 100% sure, and you want to gain the respect of the coaches, even though they might not like what you write. I mean, that's the thing. They're not going to like what you write. They're going to think that you wrote the headlines, which I'm here to tell the readers, we do not write the headlines as reporters.
It's the editor.
The editors write the headlines. 95% of the time, they are right on. The 5%, they might be a little bit off. And so that could happen at times. But you just want to have a philosophy that you want to be fair, but you also want to be at times tough, at times. And with the Celtics, before this year, they had won 17 championships. This is not a team just trying to make the playoffs. Right. This is not a team this is not the Charlotte Hornets or Minnesota Timberwolves or the Atlanta Hawks. This is the Boston Celtics. So I think you've got to cover this team because they have high expectations.
Come with facts and also, like you said, hold them accountable. But this question is generally one that people ask NBA players when they are a few years into the league and have really kind of solidified their place. I want to ask you, from a writer's perspective, what was your welcome to the league moment?
Honestly, when I was younger, I covered the Los Angeles Clippers years ago. And their coach was someone who's very familiar, who's actually in the book to Boston fans, named Bill Fitch. And Bill Fitch was in his last run. He was in his late 60s. I was 26 years old. So obviously you're talking about someone who's probably old enough to be your grandfather, maybe your, your father, obviously. And he pulled me aside once and just went off on one of my stories. And I listened, and he gained a respect. We had a respectful relationship, and he gave me advice, but he honestly kind of undressed me once about a story that I wrote. And I respected that because obviously this man is 50 years in basketball. I couldn't say anything out of respect, but I was like, okay, I got to be better. But then eventually he encouraged me, and he was nice to me, and he respected me. And I just think that's the thing when you're young in this business and you're trying to get on and you've got to talk to older people. You've got to deal with people who you have nothing in common with. And your job as a reporter, as a journalist, is to make a bond with that person that you probably have nothing in common with. That's the challenge. It's being a people person. It's talking. It's not being shy. Or I only want to talk about certain things. I only want to talk about Kendrick Lamar against Drake. I want to, no. There's times you've got to open up your palate a little bit and talk to older people and talk to people who are veterans in this business to form those bonds and relationships. So that was kind of my welcome to the league moment, was just being undressed by Bill Fitch, but also forming a relationship with him. And
I would imagine you had other mentors that were writers as well?
Yeah, obviously. Guys like Rob Parker, guys like Monty Poole, who I worked with, who was in Oakland when I was at UC Berkeley. Yeah, there's a lot of guys that, going to the National Association of Black Journalists Conference, you meet and become your mentors, or guys you just look up to, you just want to be like. Back then, it wasn't as much, no social media, no internet, so you couldn't just, text them. You couldn't hit them up on Facebook or X or whatever. You couldn't DM them. You had to literally call them. And then, and when you call somebody, you ain't trying to waste their time. So yeah, mentoring is critical in this business. And if you don't think you need a mentor, you're not in the right place.
How have you seen social media change the landscape of what we call journalism today?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a 24-hour news cycle now. You know, gone are the days where you have a story and you can hold on to it, and then you don't need to put it on social media. You don't need to put it out there. And then everyone reads it. Everyone is an expert. I just think now, it used to be there was people there was respect for the journalism field. I can't do that. I'm not a journalist. Now everybody's a journalist. Right. You know, because I think, you know, what I learned was the whole citizen journalism, people taking camera shots of car accidents. Look at this, what's going on. There are five. Yeah, like that's really what, you know, that's an important aspect of journalism. But now that's kind of spreading to sports, where everyone thinks that they can do what you do. They can write what you write. And then also just the news aspect of it. You've got to get stuff out there. You can't wait till the next day. You can't wait several hours. But you've also got to understand that if you don't have the information 100%, sometimes you got to wait. And sometimes you might have to, you know, someone might guess and be right, and you rather be right the first time than have to retract something or embarrass yourself in your company and delete a tweet or say, sorry, I didn't mean that, or that's not what happened. So it's an extra challenge, because when something happens, people want to know. They don't want to know next time. They can look on their phones and see the box score and the information. They want real information, and social media, X, you know, even in following, you have to follow some of these players on Instagram and see some of the stuff that they post and kind of giggle like, wow, I would have never put that on there at that
oversharing.
age. Yeah, like that's a little too much for me. But sometimes players put good information, important information on their social media page. That's another thing too, is just being active on social media. You have to know what these guys are up to.
All right, let's get into your book. As you've already established, you've been covering the Celtics for years. And one thing I appreciate is that you really do have this like encyclopedic knowledge of basketball, in my opinion, from what I've gathered. But how did this book come together, the Boston Celtics, an illustrated timeline? I'll show you guys the cover. It's really nice.
I was approached by doing a book on the Celtics. I was thinking about doing a book on the recent history of it, like the last 10 years and kind of how they've fallen short. But this was more of a historical book, and they asked me, like, do you want to come up with 175 moments in the team's history? So that was a challenge, and I consider myself kind of a historian, not only with sports but with U.S. history. I was pretty good at history
and pop culture.
Yeah, I'm pretty decent at that stuff. I have a pretty good memory, so I decided to kind of research the history of the organization all the way from the beginning of the franchise to who was the first owner, where they played their first games, all the way to the 60s. I think we kind of look at the Celtics and we think, well, it was Bill Russell and Kuzma, they won all those championships, and then it was Bird and them, and then it was Garnett and Pierce, and now it's Tatum and Brown. Like, there's so much in between, right? And there's so many players, and even in the 60s, that contributed to those the Frank Ramseys and Les Katoffs and Tom Heinsohns, before he was a great announcer and a coach. Heinsohn was no joke as a player, a Hall of Fame player. Casey Jones, Sam Jones, like. So what I wanted to do was research those guys and kind of bring those guys to life again in terms of their playing career and describe how they won all those championships. You know, the Celtics are a team that won a lot of game sevens, a lot of clutch. They weren't just rolling over the league. They won 8 straight titles and all that, but there was a lot of amazing games. So what I wanted to do was just put together all those moments in the history of the franchise, the 60s, the 70s. And not only for the old timers, the folks who remember those, but for the young people who don't remember, they only know the name. They've maybe grainy video. They don't know a lot about these guys. They only know that they wore the shorty shorts and the Chuck Taylors. Right.
Which still doesn't make sense to me.
And they think that life then was in complete black and white. Like they don't, life was in color in the 1960s. Even though all the tape was in black and white, life was in color. It didn't just switch. Like in 1976, it just didn't switch to color. Like, oh my God, like life's in color now. It was in color then, but you only see the grainy black and white video. So I wanted to kind of bring those players to life, bring those moments to life, all the way until obviously Banner 18, which so the the timing worked out perfectly.
Okay, I feel like it was fate. I opened the book up just to see what the first page I would land on is, and it's the NBA's first all-black starting five. So we actually do a podcast with H.R. Blakely. It's Celtics related, and we were actually recently talking about the fact that Boston gets such a bad rep for being what people would say is a racist city. But one thing that I think is lost upon history is the fact that the Celtics are still the most trailblazing team when it comes to inclusion and making sure that there was equity. Red Auerbach, he didn't care what color you were. He just wanted to see who could help him win.
As long as you bled green. Yeah, I mean, first black player drafted in Chuck Cooper, first black starting five, first black head coach in Bill Russell. And I think it's funny, Kwani, like everybody talks about the 80s and it was look at the documentaries and it was the black Lakers against the white Celtics. But there was like, our friend Cedric Maxwell was like, well, damn, where was I then? Like, I thought I was on the court then too. Him, ML Carr, Dennis Johnson, Robert Parrish. And those teams had a black coach in Casey Jones. The Lakers didn't have a black coach back then. So a trailblazing, obviously, Red Auerbach, I mean, you can't give the man enough respect for what he did for the league, for the history of the league, and how the league took off. But just some of the decisions he made to trade for McHale and Parrish, to join Larry Bird, to draft Larry Bird a year early. Like, you just learn so much about the mastery and how he was running laps around a lot of his contemporaries and keeping the Celtics relevant.
One thing I appreciate about this book, you mentioned the 145 moment, but you found a way to pay homage to people that may have been here for a short stint. Len Bias is in the book, Isaiah Thomas more recently, a person that really gave his heart and soul to the organization. But how hard was it to really narrow down who was important enough? Because, of course.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, like I said earlier, you were there, like I could have done 250 moments, and I could have done 20, 30, 40, 50 more players. But I wanted to highlight the players that people kind of might have forgotten played in Boston or were key to championship teams, like, Tiny Archibald, a guy who had led the league, the only person to lead the league in points and assists during his younger years, but came as kind of an older player to Boston and kind of was the point guard they needed to win the championship in '81. Or Paul Silas, who helped them to 2 championships, or Charlie Scott, or guys like Frank Ramsey. People go, who's that guy? Like, why? Like, what I want to do, quite honestly, because you look at all the retired numbers, and if you look up, you're like, okay, I don't know who wore 23, who wore 22, who wore 21. Like Bill Sharman, Frank Ramsey, Ed McCauley. Like, I wanted to describe those guys so people could know who actually they were.
That sounds like a new book in itself.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I wanted to describe those players too, as people could know who they were, as opposed to 21. That's just some old guy who played 80 years ago. I don't know. Like, now what Bill Sharman did, or Ed McCauley, or some of the all-time greats, and even guys who played a short time, like you said, in Boston, but made a big impact.
So the Boston Celtics, the most storied franchise in the NBA. What was the most shocking thing for you when you were doing research for this book?
Wow. Just how many clutch games they won, like how many game sevens and how many times that their backs were against the wall. This was not, they weren't a franchise that swept everybody. They had a couple of easy times, but you're talking about those 60 teams. I mean, they were a lot of battles with the Wilt Chamberlain and Bob Pettit and the St. Louis Hawks. Like, and you're like, wow, like they literally almost lost this game and almost had this reign of championships end, but this ball bounced out, or there was a turnover, or Havlicek stole the ball. Like, you're looking at, like, wow, this team was so clutch in those days. I mean, you're talking about, like, on the road in '74, winning a game 7 against Milwaukee. Like you're like, wow, the Celtics were just that team. They were that, like, hey, we might not get it done quickly, but we're going to get it done. And I just think you look at the history and just see how many just close games, all those battles against the Lakers in '69, winning at the Forum, Bill Russell and Sam Jones last game. Like, you're like, wow, this team was really clutch. You just think like Russell, 11 championships in 13 years. They must have just dominated. And they were dominant at times, but those epic playoff games that a lot of us probably kind of forgot about.
So the book is perfectly timed because it actually documents the most recent championship, Banner 18. But what are you looking forward to from this upcoming season, being the reigning champs, but also somehow still having a chip on their shoulders.
Well, you're right. Like with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, Team USA, they're going to come in there with something to prove. But this will be a tougher year. And you could say last year was tough. Some people, they had an easy road to the playoffs. They were dominant, 16-3 in the postseason. But without Kristaps Porzingis the first few months, and just them being they're the hunted now. Like the Knicks, the Sixers, and all these teams are coming after them. This will be a much more difficult season just trying to maintain that high level of play because they're going to be everyone's Super Bowl. Like, and as we know here about championships with the Patriots and the Red Sox, that year after is hard, regardless of how you approach it. And I know the Celtics are approaching it the right way. Joe Mazzulla's trying to come up with this kind of like, hey, last year's last year. We're chasing 2. We're trying to make history, and they are. Now you're trying to turn yourself into a dynasty. But it's going to be hard just for the optics of it, just because everyone's going to be shooting at you. So I expect a very tough season, maybe not as many wins, maybe not 64 wins, but I expect them to be even a better team maybe because Porzingis will join them later. Maybe Brad Stevens will make a move or two at the trade deadline. I think they're going to be prepared to make a deep playoff run, and I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not going to pick them to win a title again, but I think they'll get back to the finals.
Well, we've seen that they can do it, but what do you think needs to be done for them this season to start building what you're saying could be a dynasty?
I just think the focus of it, don't have any lulls. Last year's team never lost more than two games in a row. Like, they bounce back from adversity quickly. They did not let losses turn into ruts, turn into long losing streaks. They were a team that was like locked in. Okay, we lost. Now let's go get the next one. That type of focus. And the thing is, the best thing is get the ring night out of the way. Like the opener on the 22nd, all the fans are going to be, excited. The rings, the banner's going to be raised. It's going to be emotional. Get that out of the way. Just get back to basketball. I just think that's the whole thing. Get to the basketball. 24, as much as we're about to be in 25.
It's crazy.
It's straight up October. 3 months left. Have you done your Christmas shopping yet, Kwani?
No, please. Well, yeah. the book could be on the list.
But, we're about to be in the 25. They have to forget that 24 even happened, and they have to focus. So I just think it's mental, Kwani. You're going to get the best from Tatum. You're going to get the best from Brown, a better Tatum. You're going to get those guys, Horford, and they've got the team. Everybody's back. Derek White, Drew Holiday. But they've got to focus and lock in from the beginning.
You've seen a lot of basketball over the years, not just with the Celtics themselves, but what do you think is the key to building a dynasty? Because, again, this is something that the Celtics are known for having great basketball, but it's been a few years since.
Yeah, it's been 1969 since a Celtics team has repeated. And I think you look at recently at the Warriors, sometimes it's just luck. It's putting together what the Warriors do, Curry, Thompson, Green, they put together a core that learned and knew how to win. Iguodala, guys that knew how to win. And that's what the Celtics are doing. Derek White, winner. Drew Holiday, winner. Al Horford, winner. All those guys know what it takes now to win a championship. So you keep those guys together in ownership, and I know that's about to change, but they invested enough money to sign everyone long term to where they can make 2 to 3 runs. And but obviously it also takes good luck, good health, good fortune, the bounce of a ball to have that happen. They've got to get some good fortune too. But I do think they have the right coach in Joe Mazzulla. He's going to come up with different ways to motivate these guys. He's not satisfied, and if he's not satified, they're not satisfied.
He's never going to be satisfied. They could win 10 in a row. I feel like he'll still be like, more to be done. But for you personally, a lot of times we identify ourselves based off of what we do and the work that we do. But who would you describe yourself as outside of work?
Oh boy, I'm kind of a relic in terms of I love old music, old movies. I'm watching, if I see an episode of Martin, I'm stopping and watching it. Okay. Good Times, God bless John Amos. Yes. Any old movies, yeah, that's me. I'm kind of living in the past in terms of some of my movies and my music. Like, people ask me, what are you listening to now? It's like what I listened to 10, 15 years ago. Like, it's the same stuff. So, yeah, I kind of stay to myself. I'm a huge sports fan, NFL, Major League Baseball. I try to read as much as I can. try to just make friends, have a good time, enjoy the city of Boston. Boston has a lot to offer. It's a great city. So yeah, like, and sometimes I'm more of a homebody than probably I used to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just try to enjoy life. And I said, but sports is definitely kind of the central part of my life. I don't know where I'd be without sports. I just love it that much.
A piece of advice you'd give to someone that's interested in sports journalism? True journalism.
Yeah, don't give up. But don't expect it to happen fast. Not everybody's going to be at ESPN by the time they're 24. If it's not happening for you fast, it doesn't mean that's just your journey. Own your journey. If your journey is to be somewhere till you're 30, own that. Just do your best. Always try to improve your skill set, and also get to know people. It's a people business. Like, people think that you could be a great writer, but when you talk to people, get to know people, and learn about people, like I said before, people that are different from you. That's what this is about, getting to know sources, getting to know people that work. If you're covering the city council, getting to know the city council people, getting to know policemen, or if you're whatever beat you're on, or if you're sports, whatever coach, general manager, the person you're going to deal with could be completely different from you, 40 years older than you are. You've got to find a common bond, and that's the skill set, is being a people person, talking, being friendly, not being to yourself, being professional, just looking around at other people and how they carry themselves, and pick up little pieces of, that's how I want to. When I used to go to conventions and see other journalists, and I'd be like, wow, okay, I gotta go shopping when I get home. I like the way that guy looks. I like the way, the shoes or the suit or whatever. Like, I want to look, this is how I want to look. And I just think it's constantly striving to be better.
You mentioned being a people person. I think if someone is more introverted, they might be intimidated by pursuing a career in journalism. Do you think that should be a barrier?
I don't think you have to be like Mr. Work the Room, Mrs. Work the Room every time you walk in. Hey, like, you don't have to
baby,
do that.
shaking
Yeah, you could be shy, but you just have to you have to learn how to converse, and you have to do your research. You have to, when you're talking to a subject, Google them. Don't ask them things. There's a guy from the Celtics, Dave Hoffman, who, when he deals with kids, when they're talking to players, he goes, don't ask the players any questions that you could Google. Where'd you go to college? Or stuff like, like stuff that you could look up. Do your homework. And so when you Google these people, you can do your homework, and you know what their hobbies are, what they went to school, and you can ask them, because everyone loves someone who does their homework. If someone says, well, Kwani, I heard you went to BC. What was that like? Really? Okay. Yeah. You've done your homework. Yeah. Therefore, I have more respect and regard for you, and I will open up more because you have done your homework. That's not to ask me, well, where'd you go to school? Oh, you could have looked that up. So it's just a matter of, basically, you don't have to be Mr. Schmoozer, but just do your homework and have conversations and talk, and just learn how to converse with people, to be able to, where people can trust you and talk to you, and then give you stories, and then be sources, and then, kind of bond in that way.
That's good advice, not just for journalism, I think just for networking in life in general. But final question, what's next? Where can we find you and continue to follow your work? Well,
obviously Boston Globe, the season's just kicking off. So my stuff will be, was going to start being in more and more. Obviously, the summer's over, the off season's over. The book, obviously, you could get it on Amazon. I even saw one on eBay. Hopefully, no one bought it and resold it.
Right.
Unfortunately, but the book, and all types of projects. I'm going to be covering this team, writing the stories that people want to know. And if you have something you want me to write about, shoot me an email. Gary.Washburn@Globe, and give me a suggestion of something you might want to read. But there's all types of great stories with this team, and so I'm going to cover it and cover it as long as I can.
Well, Gary Washburn, it was a pleasure learning more about you and your career. And once again, his new book, The Boston Celtics, an illustrated timeline, is available online or wherever you get your books. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kwani.